Here at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, we demand high-quality shirtwaist blouses. This right here, this is not high quality. That is rubbish. We need something much better. This right here, are you kidding me? What are we selling to? Half women, half gorillas? Unacceptable. This is the type of high-quality work we demand here at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. Alright, so ladies and gentlemen, maybe you remember we did the factory experience during class where we were working on an assembly line and seeing if we could mass produce shirtwaist blouses, where we each had a different part that we needed to build. And what this time period was representing, or what this example was representing, was this rise of industry, this time period called the Industrial Age, or also known as the Gilded Age. It was a time when the goods were going from being produced mostly in homes to now being produced in cities in these large factories. So it's an industrial time. Also known as the Gilded Age because gilded means kind of covered with gold. And this was a time period where many people were getting massively wealthy, and it seemed as if they were covered with gold, or everything they touched was gold. During this chapter we were trying to answer this question: did the benefits of industrialization outweigh the costs? So benefits, people getting mega rich and other examples, and the costs, the workers that were doing this work. So we're trying to basically put these two things on a scale, costs on one side, benefits on the other, weigh them, and see them what actually weighs out heavier. This Gilded Age was this time period where we saw some extremely lavish lifestyles. People like the Vanderbilts were living in homes like this. We saw this interior of the home. It looks, I mean, it literally is gilded. It's covered with gold. And these types of homes. So people were very, very wealthy at this time. And how did this happen? How were people able to amass this type of wealth? Well, there was quite a few different reasons. One of those reasons was basically just becoming businessmen. So we use this word entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is a person who is willing to take the risks and has the resources in order to start and manage their own business. I gave the example in class of pencils. Let's say that I wanted to be a pencil salesman, and I went out and spent $2 to buy this pack of pencils. I've now taken a risk. For each pencil that I wanted to go out and sell, 25 cents, I could sell these for 25 cents individually, and I could end up making $6 on this pack of pencils, $4 profit. So I could take my $6 and I could go out and buy a couple more packs of pencils. I've now taken risk again, I've got some more resources, I sell these out, and I continue to make more and more money. I'm being an entrepreneur, and I'm trying to build my business. We also saw businesses being built because of the government policies that were existed during this time. One of these major policies was this theory of laissez-faire. It's this French phrase, laissez-faire, right? And it means, really means hands-off, that the government is going to be hands-off of business, that the government would not regulate the price of goods, it wouldn't regulate the quality of goods, the government would not regulate the working conditions of the laborers, and most important, or just as importantly, the government would not regulate the business practices of the bankers or the industrialists. So people were able to basically do whatever they wanted in their own business in order to try to amass some sort of wealth. We also saw lots of improved technology during this time. We saw inventors like Thomas Edison, who was an inventor and a businessman, and inventing things that still affect our lives today. Now, Thomas Edison didn't necessarily invent electricity or even the light bulb, but his factory, his invention factory, did produce the first practical incandescent light bulb, which could now be used in many homes and businesses. And his factory, his invention factory, also was able to create this electrical distribution system, which could be placed closer to where people lived and worked, and get the electricity out to their homes a lot more efficiently. Thomas Edison was a very savvy businessman because he hired inventors to work for him. He then owned their patents, and he paid their wages. We also saw this inventor, Henry Ford, who was more of a procedural inventor, that he took the idea of mass production and applied it to making automobiles. Now, Henry Ford, of course, the Ford Company, Ford Auto Company, was already making cars, but he figured out a way to take this idea of mass production and these assembly lines and apply that to his cars, where his cars would sit on a conveyor belt, they would roll right to the workers, The workers would continue to do the same job day after day after day, and producing dozens and dozens, even hundreds of cars a day. He also switched to the 8-hour workday and the ever-important $5 a day for his workers, which is a very impressive amount of money to be paid. And we saw this brother duo of inventors, the Orville and Wilbur Wright, formerly the bicycle makers, who turned their inventions and their minds toward flight and wanted to figure out ways to make man fly. And here we see some of the photographs of the Wright brothers having success with their piloted, self-powered, self-propelled flying machines. So inventions were very important in order to create these big businesses. We also saw people like Andrew Carnegie. Now, Andrew Carnegie ended up making his billions of dollars off of steel, but steel was not a very easy product to make, and it was not a very cheap product to make. He started his business actually making iron, and iron was being used all over the country, especially on the railroads. But iron, even though you wouldn't want to get walloped over the head with an iron bar, probably hurt, iron is actually a pretty soft metal, so it would wear down very quickly. But it was cheaper, so that's what people wanted to use. So Carnegie knew, he had this idea, this vision that steel was the future, that steel was king, and he wanted to figure out ways to produce steel more efficiently and cheaper. So he visited a factory in England and saw this Bessemer process in action. Now, the Bessemer process was a process that would take this softer, cheaper metal, iron, and basically refine it, get out the impurities, and turn it to this harder, lighter, and now cheaper metal of steel. Now, once Carnegie brought this Bessemer process back to the United States and started using it, it was all in the books from there. He was able to become extremely successful making and selling steel, which basically helped build this country, especially building railroads, and especially building bridges, and especially building taller buildings. We also saw this man right here, this tycoon, this other captain of industry, John D. Rockefeller, who made his billions of dollars, and I did say billions with a B, hundreds of billions of dollars, off of black gold. This stuff right here we call oil. Now, Rockefeller and Carnegie both used many particular business practices that were able to build their companies up to what they were, to become captains of industry, and to basically hold monopolies in their industry. Now let me go to that phrase, monopoly. I'd already talked about becoming an entrepreneur, wanting to just build a business, take the risks, and manage your business. But a monopoly was once you owned nearly all or all of an industry. So if I was in the pencil game here and I got rid of all the other competition, I bought them all out, got all those companies shut down, and I was the only guy out there selling pencils, I could sell these pencils for whatever I want. Forget 25 cents. Let's try $2, $3 a pencil. If you wanted a pencil bad enough, you'd have to buy it from me. I could set the prices. I now have a monopoly. And these guys right here, Rockefeller, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, they were building monopolies where they controlled the prices. Now let's say that I was selling pencils, but this guy over here was also selling pencils. I now have some competition. And let's say there was somebody else also selling pencils. We got 3 companies in the pencil game. Well, we could continue to try to undercut each other, try to get lower prices for each other. But you know what? Why don't the 3 of us just form a trust? Fist bump. We have now formed a trust where the 3 of us work together. We're going to set the prices. Let's say we're going to set these at $1 a pencil. We want to sell these pencils for $1 each. You could buy them from me, you could buy them from that guy, or you could buy them from that guy over there. But you're going to buy them for $1 a piece. We can set the market price. We can set the wages on this company. We are a trust. So monopolies and trusts made it really difficult for everyday people to actually have any kind of success and build their own businesses, because these kinds of businesses were closing them all out. So once monopolies and trusts were created, the owners could set the wages at low amounts. They could control the prices of the goods, and they could keep them high. Trusts were so powerful that it was nearly impossible to break them up. So, how did these companies and these businesses, these corporations, these monopolies actually do any of the work? Well, they did it on the backs of the modern laborers. So, these factories were being built in urban areas. So, urbanization is this rapid growth of cities. And during urbanization, we saw extremely poor living conditions because there was thousands and thousands, even millions of people that needed jobs, and they were going to go where the jobs were, and that was the factories in these big cities. So they were living in these raggedy tenement buildings. They were cheaply made. There was no water. There was no heat. They were extremely unclean, disease-ridden. There was no sewer systems. Many families lived in one tenement, and there was very few windows for air. These were extremely, extremely poor living conditions. We also saw poor working conditions where those business owners, those monopolies, those captains of industry, they were making it really rough on the workers. They were paying them low wages. They had very dangerous conditions. We saw that in the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire. They were working extremely long hours. They didn't get sick days, vacation days. They didn't get breaks. There was also child labor. I mean, look at these kids. Kids 7, 8, 9 years old working in factories, working in mills, working in mines. And it was extremely dangerous for them because they're just small kids. Now, a lot of times these kids were hired because they would work for even less. I mean, we're talking pennies a day. They were working for even less. They also had really small hands, and their small hands could fit into these machines right here, and they could work with those machines and fix them a little bit easier. Now, when you're sticking small hands in those kinds of machines, that's also dangerous. It's very easy to lose a hand, right? Okay. So we saw really bad working conditions, and we also saw child labor. So did things ever get better? I mean, what could these laborers ever do when they're facing off against these billionaires, these captains of industry, these titans, and we have these kinds of people that are trying to fight against them? Well, they had to work together. They couldn't just stand separately. One person tries to stand up or try to say, let's change something, and they're just going to get fired. I mean, that's as easy as that. They're just going to get fired. Even 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 15 or 20, 100 even, they could just be replaced because there were so many workers out there that wanted jobs desperately. They would be willing to take your job and probably even work for less. So you needed everybody to band together in order to actually get any better conditions, so labor unions were formed. So a labor union is an organization that brings together workers in the same trade, the same job, and their goal was to fight physically or verbally for better wages and better working conditions. So these labor unions comprised of thousands of people, and they did actually get some better conditions for these workers. So during this age of industry, we saw the benefits, we saw the costs. We're trying to compare the two. I'm going to leave you with this chart right here, which lists off some of the benefits and some of the costs. And I'm going to let you go ahead and be the judge while we listen to Fill My Tummy.
I'm an immigrant. I work for rice. If I don't get rice, we're hungry twice. Far from those mansions, we live with mice. We're the other half, and this is life.